You see, there's a peculiar paradox built into the very machinery of knowing. The more you know, the less you exist. That sounds absurd at first, like some kind of Zen riddle thrown at you by a cosmic trickster. But if you really sit with it, if you let that phrase unravel itself inside the labyrinth of your own mind, you begin to see that it's not a riddle at all. It's a revelation about the nature of consciousness and the cost of awareness. Knowledge is a dissolving agent. It erodes the boundaries that define what we call the self. Each time you truly understand something, you're not adding a piece to your identity, you're taking one away. You are peeling back the skin of illusion, and what lies beneath is not you in the personal sense, but the naked awareness that was there before any name, before any story, before even the idea that there was someone here to know anything. We live in an age obsessed with accumulation, information, data, facts, experience, mastery. We devour knowledge the way a fire devours oxygen, thinking it will make us more powerful, more real, more substantial. But the real irony is that the deeper you go, the more you realize that the knower is disappearing. The structure doing the knowing begins to crumble under the weight of its own inquiry. Think of it this way. When you were a child, the world was full of mystery. The sky was an ocean of magic. The trees were alive in ways you couldn't explain. You felt the world as an extension of your own imagination. Then you grew up, learned the names of things: sky, tree, light, gravity. And with each name came a kind of diminishment. The infinite collapsed into the familiar. The living became mechanical. Knowledge pinned the butterfly of wonder to the board of certainty. And yet, if you look closely, you see that knowing is not the same as being conscious. Knowing is a structure. Consciousness is a mystery. The two are not identical. In fact, the more we fill consciousness with knowledge, the less room there is for the unknown, for that living space in which the mystery breathes. When I say the more you know, the less you exist, I'm pointing to the strange truth that the ego, the psychological self, is built out of ignorance, out of misperception. It's a house of mirrors that exists only as long as you mistake the reflections for reality. To know truly is to shatter those mirrors, and when they shatter, what remains is not you in the old sense, it's something vaster, impersonal, oceanic. But from the standpoint of the ego, that's annihilation. That's death. And so the paradox is that to truly awaken is to vanish. You dissolve into the act of perception itself. You no longer stand apart from the world, you become the transparency through which the world perceives itself. The knower and the known merge into one flowing movement of awareness. The distinction collapses. The danger, though, is that most people confuse this with nihilism, as if I were saying that nothing exists, or that knowledge should be abandoned. No, quite the contrary. The point is to see through knowledge, not to throw it away. It's to realize that all our models of reality are provisional. They're like scaffolding around a cathedral we can never quite build. Every insight is a temporary platform, and the moment you mistake it for the whole structure, you stop growing. Reality isn't a puzzle to be solved. It's a mystery to be participated in. The universe doesn't ask for your conclusions, it invites your attention. Let me tell you a story. Once, long ago, there was a man who believed that if he could name every star in the sky, he would understand the mind of God. Night after night he studied, mapped, and catalogued. Years passed. His lists grew thicker, his eyes dimmer. One night, as he prepared to mark another constellation, he looked up and saw that the stars had gone. The sky was empty. In his obsession to know, he had stopped seeing. That's the trap of knowledge. It builds maps so convincing that we forget to walk the terrain. The terrain is alive, untamed, infinite. The map is static, limited, dead. The more complete the map becomes, the smaller the traveler feels, until finally there's no traveler left at all, only the cartography of what once was. This, I think, is what's happening to us collectively. We're drowning in information and starving for meaning. We've become so identified with the process of knowing that we've forgotten the taste of mystery. We are consuming the world instead of communing with it. And as our knowing expands, our being contracts. You can feel it in yourself. You read more, study more, analyze more, and yet, do you feel more alive? Or do you feel more fractured, more abstracted, more like a ghost watching your own life from the outside? The intellect is a marvelous tool, but a terrible master. The self, as most of us experience it, is a kind of knot in the field of awareness, a contraction created by resistance to the flow of experience. But when you begin to see that knowledge itself is only another wave on the surface of the ocean, the knot loosens, awareness expands. You dissolve into the totality that was always there. It's like a drop of water realizing it was never separate from the ocean. It only imagined itself as distinct because it could form a shape for a moment. Knowledge was the shape. Consciousness was the water. When the shape breaks, the water rejoins itself. The drop ceases to exist, but only because it has become the sea. So when I say the more you know, the less you exist, I'm inviting you to consider that knowledge is a kind of beautiful illusion, a necessary tool of survival, but not the essence of being. The deeper form of knowing is not about acquiring facts. It's about dissolving the boundaries that separate you from what is. It's about remembering the silence before the first word was ever spoken. There's a kind of freedom in that, because if the you that needs to know begins to fade, what remains is pure experience, unmediated, immediate, luminous. That's what the mystics were always talking about. Not knowledge in the sense of content, but gnosis, direct apprehension of the real. And it's terrifying at first, because it feels like you're disappearing. But that's the birth cry of freedom. And so, when the illusion of the knower begins to fade, something extraordinary happens. The world which once seemed external begins to glow from the inside out. The trees are no longer objects in space. They are living gestures of the same consciousness that looks through your eyes. The air itself becomes intelligent. The birds aren't singing to you. They are you.
expressing themselves in another dialect of the same great language of being. But this recognition doesn't come as a grand epiphany with trumpets and halos. It's more like the quiet undoing of a spell. You notice that the line between self and world has always been a kind of mirage. The more you try to grasp reality, the more it slips through your fingers. And in that letting go, in that surrender, the barrier dissolves. It's funny, really. The ego wants to know everything so it can survive. But the moment you truly know, not intellectually, but existentially, that everything is one, the ego is rendered obsolete. It's like a flashlight in the sunlight. It worked beautifully in the dark, but when the dawn arrives, its light no longer defines anything. What we call knowing is often an attempt to stabilize the unknown, to domesticate it, to make it behave. We want certainty because we're afraid of the vastness. We fear that if we stop naming, defining, controlling, we'll be swallowed by chaos. But what if that swallowing is precisely what we've been yearning for all along? What if the chaos is not our enemy, but our mother? You see, consciousness is not a possession, it's an event. It's something the universe is doing. When you realize this, the old idea of I know collapses, because there is no I apart from the knowing. There's just the dance, the universe folding back upon itself in awareness, moment by moment. It's like standing before an ocean wave. The wave rises, forms, curls, and dissolves. You can name it, describe it, even measure it. But can you really separate it from the ocean? Of course not.
The wave's entire identity is borrowed from the sea. So it is with you. The mind says, I know. But what's really happening is that the universe is knowing itself through you. And here's where it gets beautifully paradoxical. The more the universe knows itself through you, the less room there is for the fiction of you as a separate entity. The knowledge doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the totality. You were never the author. You were the page. This realization is both liberating and humbling, because it dissolves the hierarchy we've built around intelligence, progress, and mastery. The scientist peering through a microscope, the artist painting a landscape, the child staring at a snail on the sidewalk. They are all participating in the same cosmic act of self-recognition. None of them own their insight. They are each momentary apertures in the infinite lens of being. The tragedy of our civilization is that we've mistaken the map for the territory, the description for the thing described. We've become intoxicated with symbols, words, formulas, ideologies, and forgotten that they're only shadows on the wall of the cave. The more we refine our symbols, the more disconnected we become from the raw, unmediated presence of reality. We've constructed such a detailed model of the world that we no longer see the world itself. And this is why knowledge, in the conventional sense, is the slow death of the soul. Not because knowledge is bad, but because it's incomplete. It's always pointing, never arriving. It gives you the outline, but not the essence. It tells you how light travels, but not what it feels like to see a sunrise. It measures the brain, but misses the mind. It counts the stars, but forgets to wonder. To exist fully is to wonder. Wonder is the bridge between knowing and being. When you wonder, you stand at the threshold of understanding, but you don't cross it. You linger there in awe, allowing the mystery to speak in its own tongue. And in that humility, the self loosens. You become porous to the cosmos. The boundaries soften. The illusion of separateness begins to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. You might ask, so what am I supposed to do with this understanding? If knowledge diminishes me, should I stop learning? No. You keep learning, but you learn differently. You learn not to own what you know, but to inhabit it. You stop trying to accumulate and start to participate. Knowledge becomes an act of communion, not conquest. Imagine a musician playing a piece of music. If she tries to control every note, to dominate the rhythm, the music dies. But if she surrenders to the melody, lets it move through her, then something transcendent occurs. She disappears, and only the music remains. That's what it means to know without existing.
When you learn to think like that, even the simplest act becomes sacred. Drinking water, listening to the rain, feeling the pulse in your wrist, all of it becomes a gateway to the infinite. Because you're no longer looking at the world, you're looking as the world. The mystics called this dying before you die. It's the art of disappearing while still breathing. It's realizing that your identity is a temporary pattern in the current of being. You don't resist the current anymore. You are the current. And in that moment, the hunger to know dissolves, replaced by the joy of being. You no longer need to define the universe because you're finally resting inside it. The paradox resolves itself. The more you disappear, the more vividly the world appears. The less you exist, the more everything else comes alive. You see, what we fear most, our own dissolution, is actually the doorway to meaning. The ego, in its frantic attempt to maintain control, has convinced us that to be someone is the highest achievement. But in truth, it's to be no one that reveals the fullness of life. When you stop clinging to the idea of being a person, you become the totality of experience, unfiltered, unbound, infinite. So if knowledge makes you less, it is only so that something greater can shine through the cracks. The purpose of all understanding is to lead you back to unknowing, to the open field beyond thought, where reality dances without a name. When the mind grows quiet, not because it has run out of answers, but because it has realized that answers are irrelevant, then existence reveals itself as it is, wild, immediate, and unspeakably alive. To know nothing and yet to live fully, that is the highest art. Because to know nothing is not to be ignorant, it is to be free. Ignorance is a refusal to see. Innocence is a readiness to see without distortion. When you truly know nothing, you have finally stopped projecting your ideas onto the world, and the world can finally reveal itself to you.
It's strange, isn't it, that we spend our whole lives chasing meaning, only to discover that meaning was never hiding in things. It was hiding behind the one who seeks. You tear away layer after layer, insight after insight, and at the end, there's no you left to receive the revelation. Only the revelation itself remains. And that, my friends, is what the mystics meant when they said, "The seeker and the sought are one." The irony is, the self wants to awaken, but awakening means the end of the self. It's like a moth yearning for the flame. The moment it touches what it seeks, it vanishes. And yet the fire does not destroy the moth, it transforms it. The moth becomes light.
This is the secret of all genuine transformation. Every moment of true understanding is a small death, a surrender of the old pattern. When you realize something deeply, the structure of who you were before that realization dissolves. That's why change feels so frightening. You can sense that something in you is dying. But if you look closely, you see that what dies was never real to begin with. It was a mask, a mirage, a temporary configuration of thought pretending to be a person. So when you feel yourself disappearing into insight, don't resist it. Let it happen. That's not the end of your life. That's the beginning of your freedom. You see, the mind is terrified of emptiness. It wants to fill the silence with explanations, theories, beliefs, anything to avoid confronting its own non-existence. But the silence isn't empty at all. It's overflowing. It's pregnant with everything that has ever been and will ever be. It is the womb of creation itself. When you rest in that silence, without reaching for knowledge, something incredible happens. Life begins to live you. The breath breathes itself. The eyes open by themselves. Thoughts rise and fall like waves, and you are no longer trying to control them. You become the stillness in which they occur. That stillness is not passive. It is the ultimate intelligence. It moves mountains, spins galaxies, and grows forests, all without effort. The universe has been doing just fine without your opinions. It doesn't need your permission to exist. What it needs is your participation, your attention, your willingness to be what you already are. And this is where true creativity begins. The artist, the thinker, the mystic, they all touch that place of unknowing. They dive into the void, not to control it, but to be reshaped by it. Out of that nothingness, the new is born. Because what is original can only arise where the old has died. When you dissolve into the unknown, creation flows through you like a river. You become a conduit of the intelligence of the cosmos. You stop thinking about life and start being life. And the things you create, a painting, a poem, a conversation, a moment of kindness, carry that frequency of aliveness. They are born from the mystery, not the mind. And that's the paradox. The more you know, the less you exist as a separate self, but the more the universe itself can express through you. You vanish, but life becomes radiant. The painter disappears, but the art remains. The dancer dissolves, but the dance continues. The music plays, and there's no one left to claim it.
Death itself, then, is not the enemy. It's the ultimate teacher. Because death is simply the completion of what every moment of understanding has been preparing you for. The final relinquishing of identity. The great exhalation into the infinite. And if you've been practicing dying a little every day, letting go of certainty, letting go of control, letting go of the need to be someone, then when the moment comes, it won't be a tragedy. It'll be the most natural thing in the world, like a wave returning to the sea. When you understand this, you stop clinging to permanence. You begin to love the fleetingness of things, the cherry blossoms that bloom and fall, the sunlight flickering on a river, the laughter that fades into silence. You see that the beauty is in the transience, because only what dies can be alive. Immortality would be stasis, a kind of cosmic boredom, but impermanence keeps the dance moving. It keeps creation fresh. So maybe existence is not about becoming more real, more substantial, more defined. Maybe it's about learning to become more transparent, more fluid, more open, to let light pass through you without distortion, to be a window, not a wall. When you look at the world like that, you see that everything is sacred. The ordinary becomes luminous. Even your mistakes, your confusions, your forgettings, they're all part of the great unfolding. The universe isn't judging you. It's exploring itself through you. It's dreaming, experimenting, learning to see its own face. And the more you surrender to that, the lighter you become. You start to laugh more easily, to forgive more freely, to love without reason. You realize that seriousness was just the ego defending itself. The cosmic joke is that you were never in control and you never needed to be. So when I say the more you know, the less you exist, I mean it as a kind of invitation, an invitation to dissolve gracefully into the intelligence that gave you birth, to trust that when you stop trying to hold the world together, it doesn't fall apart. It reveals its wholeness, because you were never separate from it to begin with. You were never the observer standing apart from the cosmos. You were always the cosmos observing itself. And now perhaps you can finally relax into that recognition. The more you know, the less you exist. But the less you exist, the more life knows itself through you. That's the ultimate paradox. And once you taste it, even for a moment, you understand that you don't need to know anything ever again. You just need to be.